For one reason or another, immigration is always on the news. And one of the main headlines this year was the migrant crisis in New York City and migrants allegedly receiving free housing and participating in welfare programs all across the country. And this raised concerns for many people who claim that immigrants abuse the welfare state. So, is there validity to this concern of immigrants abusing the welfare state? And if there is it a problem with immigration or is it a problem with the welfare state itself? And how should we think about immigration and welfare programs in the context of today's mixed economy? Welcome to New Idea Live, the podcast of the Immigrant Institute. I'm Agustina, and with me is Onkar, and we'll be discussing these questions about this very controversial topic. So, Onkar, I think it's worth starting with some facts or some data that we have available about really what is the impact of immigration on the welfare state. So I think it's worth saying, okay, because the impression that any person would get just from watching the news, especially kind of like conservative publications and channels, I think they would think that immigrants just take so much welfare and that they are like, I've seen things as something like they are being provided iPhones and they have all this lavish lifestyle from just welfare. But even illegal immigrants, which is what one of the claims, that illegal immigrants get all this welfare. But the truth is that, what does the law say? At the federal level, immigrants are mostly restricted from receiving welfare. So most legal immigrants, meaning lawful permanent residents, people here legally that have gone through the process, can't access mean tested welfare at the federal level for the first 5 years of residency, with a few exceptions that are mostly at the state level and that are funded with state taxes. This is, again, legal immigrants. Illegal immigrants don't have access at all to welfare at the federal level except for emergency Medicaid. So why is it then that we see these headlines about migrants receiving welfare in New York City? That is because that comes from the local government. That comes from a law in New York City called the Right to Shelter Law, that is providing shelter and food and other resources it makes it so the state has the obligation to provide all these resources to anyone who is unhoused. So that is the context of what benefits, that type of benefits immigrants are allowed to get, legal and illegal, in the United States. Now, we have some data that says that immigrants consume 27%, very precise number, less welfare than native-born Americans. If we widen to like this number to all government-funded services, immigrants allegedly pay $1.43 in taxes for every $1 they consume in benefits from local, state, and federal programs. So that would mean that the impact of that immigrants overall contribute more than they consume. So one question I wanted to ask you, Onkar, what do we make about these numbers? Are these useful to understanding the issue of immigration and welfare?
I'm skeptical of the numbers, and particularly when you give they consume 27% less welfare. That level of accuracy of getting in the numbers, I'm skeptical of, because if you think of what they're trying to calculate and how difficult it is to calculate, and then what data you have to draw on in order to try to make these calculations, the more you think about it, the more you get, yeah, this would be really, really hard to calculate. Just to calculate, take it outside of immigration. So part of what you brought up is they pay 1.43 in taxes for every dollar they consume. Try to calculate what you pay in taxes, or just what an average American citizen. What if I paid in property taxes, sales taxes? I'm in the state of Virginia. There's taxes on vehicles, what taxes do you pay at the gasoline pump, and those vary from state to state and so on. If you take a road trip and travel into 8 states, like how much tax did you pay? Some states have sales tax, some don't. And so if you really thought, like, can I calculate even down to with a margin of error of $1,000 or even $10,000, what I've paid in taxes? I'm skeptical I can do that. I'm skeptical some outside person looking at some data about me could do that. Put it in the context of immigration. When you look at, if you just take one welfare program, Social Security, and look, they're trying to figure out what do Americans or citizens pay, what do immigrants pay, and then try to divide it up into legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. I mean, one thing is known, that for illegal immigrants, many, in order to hold a job and so, have to give some number. So they give a fraudulent Social Security number, which means they're paying Social Security taxes, knowing full well they'll never be able to claim this when they get old for Social Security. The Social Security Administration keeps some kind of number in regard to this, and has some kind of bureaucratic classification of what this is. I've seen some estimates that it's $100 billion that has been paid by people who will never recover it because they're using fraudulent or fake Social Security numbers. The idea that the Social Security Administration is tracking this and could calculate this, and so to know, like, we've got this much fraud in the system and this is what it means. So there's no way a government agency can do that. If you look at just what happened, like, say, with COVID funds, they have no idea. For like 20% of the funds, they don't know what happened, who got it. So it's so, one, complex, and two, you're drawing on data that is likely faulty, incomplete, and so on. So at best, these numbers, I think, are guesstimates. But when you get it to the accuracy and it's on both sides, that it's like pro-immigration or anti-immigration, they'll have different numbers, and I don't find it surprising that they'll have different numbers, because you can stress the importance of certain things over others, and then you can make estimate. Well, I estimate the fraud's this, and somebody else estimates it. No, it's less or it's more than that, and so you can easily get to a number that you want to get to. Either, or look, they don't draw as much welfare as the native born, or they draw more, and so all these numbers I would take with more than a grain of salt.
Yeah, and even like these numbers say, okay, without immigration, like one of the reasons why the pro-immigration people like to quote these numbers is, look, without immigrants, we won't have a welfare state, like, which like they see like it's a very bad thing. But because there won't be enough people contributing to sustain the people that are retiring. So that is an argument that is usually made. But what you just said, like, like the pro-immigration people will have this set of arguments saying, like, look, they're net positive, and the other side will say, well, actually, my numbers say otherwise. I think this type of debate is what's typical in immigration. It's like, I have this set of facts, and the opposing side has this other set of facts. Someone is lying, and it ain't me. Essentially, that's what both sides claim. But I find this extremely unsatisfactory, because it is a debate that is extremely pragmatic, and just saying like, oh yeah, immigrants abuse the welfare state, and the response is, no, they don't. Look at these facts, and they're like, no, but mine say different. It does not answer the question. But because what if for some reason, like, the actual facts came out that immigrants do take more than they consume more than they give to the system. But what does that mean? Would that mean that we need to stop immigration because they consume more welfare than they contribute? I think that while that would be a consideration that's important to take into account, and to say, okay, why is this happening? It can't be the answer that because of these data changes, then we need to change the entire principle of, like, should we have free immigration, or should we have immigration or not? it strikes me as exactly unprincipled. So I wanted to ask you, Onkar, about like how do we think about this issue? Like how do we think about the immigration and welfare debate? Get like stepping like kind of like zooming out from this very pragmatic fight about like I have these facts and the other side has these facts and then we agree to disagree essentially.
It's pragmatic, but it's also collectivistic. And that's what I resent the most about the whole debate. And it's the nature of a welfare system, and it's more broadly the nature of a mixed economy. When you have this much government control, and that part of what the government is doing is taking money from people who earn it, confiscating it, and giving it to people who didn't earn it. And precisely like you lose title to your earnings precisely because you earned it. And you gain title, someone else gains title precisely because they didn't earn it. That's what a welfare system is. So to go around then and say, well, look, there's immigrants who get more than they've paid in. That's what a welfare system is. And it's the same of the recipients in who are American. The whole thing is set up to take money from people who earn it and to give it to people who didn't. And that's true whether it's an immigrant or an American citizen who's getting welfare. Um, so this is part of to make this is essentially about immigration. It's not essentially about immigration. It's essentially about the welfare state and the mixed economy. And like here, take something just completely outside that doesn't involve immigration. There's a context in a normal human pro-life context in which you would say, look, life expectancy in the US is going up. People are living longer. That's a great thing. When you have something like Social Security, the fact that other people are living longer becomes a threat to you. And particularly like if you're younger at working age, now the idea that this person who I have to pay for their Social Security and all these welfare system and programs are not investments. It's not there's some fund that's invested in stocks and bonds and now it's growing and that's how we pay for people's retirement. You pay Social Security is a program that took money from young people who earned it and gave it to old people with the promise that when these young people get old, we'll take from other young people, we'll take their money and give it to you. That's what the whole program is. And that's why now when we have a population that's living longer and the ratio of retirees to workers is growing, retirees are a threat to young people. And young people can rightly think, but it's perverse that the system's doing this, but rightly think, yeah, I don't want these people to live longer because then I have to pay for 2 more years of their retirement. And that means my Social Security taxes go up. I have less money. I can't buy a home. I can't have another kid because we can't afford it. And it pits people against each other. That's what the welfare state does in a mixed economy. And it has nothing to do with immigration. Immigration is just at most an instance of it. But then when you think of what the US immigration programs are, and this is why so many economists say the solution of them not going bankrupt is going to involve more immigration, because what they're not transfers basically to poor people, they're transfers to old people, and transfers are euphemism. It's giving money for taking it from people who earned it and giving it to older people. Medicare and Social Security, the people who are getting money from these programs are older people. And so immigration tends to be younger people coming into the country, and you're going to need it to pay for those programs. That's also partly what's so crazy about the debate. It's of all the things to single out, well, immigration's a drain on the system. Immigration is part of what keeps the system afloat.
Yeah, I agree that this perspective of people living longer being a burden on the people that are of working age It's like, okay, the longer people live, the more I have to sacrifice and put my own values aside and on hold, because I have to contribute this to the people that are living longer. So, and I think it
And
also distorts. Go ahead.
I was going to say that it's people have to realize this is what a mixed economy does to you. It makes you look. I have older neighbors. The idea that I should resent them that they're living longer is bizarre. I like my neighbors, friendly with them. The idea, oh, but I wish they would die so I don't have to pay for their retirement. That's crazy. But the
Mm-hmm.
system pushes in that direction. And you have to really resist being pushed in that direction. And similarly, people pushing, oh, but you should think of immigrants as a drain on you and you're going to have to pay more taxes and so on. The whole system tries to tie people together, and this is the collectivism, and pit people against each other. Like if you live longer, that means I have less money, so maybe I should want that you don't live longer. One has to think the system's the enemy, not this old person. And similarly, even if you thought immigrants are a drain on the your taxes and so on, the solution is not, oh, to hate immigrants. The solution is hate the system that's pushing you to be suspicious of people who want to come here, build a life and work.
Yeah, and I think this impacts the debate also in ways that where people that are, I read people that are generally pro-immigration, but they say like, look, we only can bring skilled immigrants and of working age. Because if we keep bringing just, the parents of the immigrants and, letting the citizen sponsor older people, it doesn't fiscally make sense. So to me, this is upsetting because it's seeing people as like numbers in a way that, okay, if it doesn't make sense fiscally for you to come live your life here in freedom in America, even if it's the last 20 years of your life, then you cannot come. That is not the way to think about immigration, I don't think. And this is part of how this issue distorts the debate and makes it so pragmatic that it loses sight of what really matters, I think. But also, so I think someone on the left would respond to your argument on Onkar, like, but of course that you should sacrifice, and you should pay for someone else's retirement. And I find that answer also unsatisfactory. It can't be that we don't care about this thing that is happening, that we actually say it is okay for people to, or people have this duty and they should be okay with it, to just have their taxes raised so they can fund an aging population. That's what the left would say, and I also find it unsatisfactory. But I think, the debate is more nuanced than just left and right. There are like other, other views that, a little bit in between. But I think that what I've seen is that it's basically a lot of people on the right, a lot of conservatives just tend to have this very specific view that is anti-immigration when it comes to the welfare state and how they use the welfare state to advocate for restrictions in immigration. So a lot of right-wing people tend to portray the problem as this absolutely massive thing. Like I said earlier, if you watch the news, some conservative outlets, you will think, oh my God, immigrants are just making more money than I am making, like a citizen that makes it's like an average salary in the United States. And it is actually not like that, but the right some conservatives keep making up facts about this issue to rile people up, it seems like. So we have, I grabbed just one example about with a post by Lauren Boebert. So this is a claim that immigrants receive a check from the government every month. And I'll say, I've been really paying attention and focusing on the issue of immigration for about, really focusing on it for about 2 years, 2.5 years. A claim like this comes up at least, and it makes headlines and all that, at least 2, if not 3 times a year. It is very common. So Boebert says, Biden is giving each illegal family $2,200 per month plus a free plane ticket and free medical care. If you come to this country illegally, you get everything handed to you on a silver platter. If you're a struggling American citizen, you get nothing. You actually just subsidize this foolishness. So there is a lot to unpack in this tweet. I'll say this is essentially made out of like thin air. Like part of the confusion, the intentional confusion involved here is she's confusing migrants and asylum seekers who have entered the United States legally with illegal immigrants, and she's confusing some of one-time payments to organizations that help asylum seekers with a stipend of $2,200 a month plus a free plane ticket and free medical care. She's confusing those things. Essentially, this is all made up. So this anti-immigrant side, they just keep making facts up about welfare, which seems to be one of the issues that people care the most about. Why is it, Onkar, that they just keep making up this stuff and feeding these narratives? Like this has answered, like this claim about the monthly check of $2,000+ has been debunked time and time again. It keeps coming up a couple times a year. Why is this? Why is a congressperson like doing this and like lying to constituents in this way, which is it's extreme. Like I think it's shameful. I know that Bobber has been shamed for other really questionable behavior she's had, but like, she hasn't been shamed enough for things like this, I don't think. So why is it immigrant? Is this scapegoating? Why is this, Onkar? Is this scapegoating immigrants? Like what's going on here?
Yes, I think it's obviously scapegoating immigrants, and that's part of what you're responding to so negatively in regard. And yeah, this kind of thing you see regularly in the political debate about immigration. They're an easy scapegoat. They're and particularly as we descend more into tribalism, they're the outsider, the different, the other. It's easy to pin all the problems on them. And notice the way she puts it: if you're a struggling American citizen, you get nothing. And the part of it that it's playing to the base, there certainly is in sort of the Trumpian base, there's certainly xenophobia and racism, but there's also more broadly, it's again, this is thinking, this is what a mixed economy does. And Ayn Rand was adamant that what it does is it breaks people into warring groups. It descends more and more into gang warfare. It's you're trying to exploit other people and feel like other people are trying to exploit you, and so that there's many Americans who will see like take just the financial crisis, and it's these people they see Wall Street being bailed out. They see all kinds of people who took out mortgages who don't seem to suffer from the fact they get bailed out in a certain way, or take the student loan that Biden is doing. It's like we didn't go to college, we went straight to work, and so these people took out loans, and now it's it turns out they're not loans, they were free money, because we're forgiving the loans. And they look at that and they think of it, and part of the way it's put it, like it's a rigged system, and it's us against them. It's and so it's again what a mixed economy does is instead of looking, this is great that you're going to college and getting an education, now you think of it, well, maybe it's a threat to me that they're going to college because they're going to take loans and then their loans are going to be forgiven. But forgiven means somebody else paid for this, which means I who didn't go to college is paying for the person who went to college. And like, how's that fair? And it's playing on that. And those things are real. People see these, can't fully conceptualize or understand what's happening. This is why they're vulnerable to a scapegoat. That it's, so you're not doing as well, and you see all these other people. Well, it's immigration, and it's the immigrants doing it. And look at that, what they do, and and they parade someone who has an iPhone or getting money and say, like, this is what it is all like. This is where all your money's going. This is why you're held back. And again, people are susceptible to it. not all for good reasons. So there is some xenophobia and racism, but I don't think you can understand the full phenomenon without thinking what the mixed economy does to people, and it makes everyone suspicious of everyone else, and that's a recipe for conflict.
Yes, and instead of, again, focusing on the actual enemy, let's say the welfare state, it's the focus on the recipients. But the recipients are made to be, in a way, they're made to be parasites of other people, because that's how the system works. But it's interesting to me because many go ahead.
No, go ahead. Oh.
Many conservatives oppose the welfare state. We know that. Like, they oppose it in some way or another, either kind of like doing away with it or restricting it, shrinking it in considerable ways. But when it comes to immigration, the reaction is not, "Oh, this is another reason why we should abolish the welfare state." The reaction is let's ban immigration. So the reaction is to further violate rights, to impose further restrictions, in this case on immigration, instead of looking at the fact that the welfare state is a problem. That is what makes me sometimes suspicious of the motivation of some of the people that get so riled up about immigrants and the welfare state. It's like, okay, why is your focus on the immigrants and not on the real cause of it, which is the welfare state?
Yes, and particularly to go back to something we said before, that in the context of the U.S. welfare state or U.S. welfare programs, that they so obviously need immigration to keep them afloat, that your whole focus will be, we've got to restrict immigration versus we've got to try to reduce and reform our welfare programs, which everybody knows are unsustainable, and yet there's no political will to do anything in regard to it. That has to be the target, not immigration. And as I said, if anything, immigration would fit in. Well, we obviously need, until we reform these programs, you need much more immigration. Otherwise, that will happen, but it's politically unfeasible that it will happen, is you have massive cuts in these programs. Now the age of that you can get Social Security goes from 67 to 75. Like, that's the only way, which means all kinds of people who were thinking about, well, my retirement will be such that I'll be able to get Social Security, now all of a sudden won't be able to get it. And given that reality, that it's, oh, we can't have immigration, there's something off in the whole motivation. And I would add one other thing here that's important, and this is particularly in regard to the left. The idea of that you want immigration but don't care if people are able to work, that's perverse. And yet it's so much on the left. We want immigrants. Yeah, we'll take care of them. They're suffering. They're in need. So we'll have all kinds of assistance program. That's their whole focus, rather than, people should be able to come here, and it should be as easy as possible to be able to work. So that most of the people coming here don't want to be on welfare. And if the system forces them, like, it's, that we will take a job. No, you're not allowed to take a job. Do you have a work permit? And no, you don't have that. It pushes them in the direction of, well, the only way that I can cope, or maybe cope for the first few months, because I'm not allowed to work, and maybe I will be at some point. So they go on these kinds of welfare programs. The idea that you would blame them, that, like, why are you going on welfare? Well, you don't let me work. And the left couldn't care less about that, in my view. Or at least most on the left. There are some better people who realize, like, say, what happened in New York City, that it's, part of the problem is many of these people don't want to be put up, like, their charity cases, unable to sustain their own lives and so on. But if you don't let them take any job, then what are they going to do? And the idea that it's, some of the even better people, Democrats and so on, is, maybe we should get at least temporary work permits and so on. And Yeah, if you take out the temporary, that's what you should do.
Yeah, that brings me, Onkar, to a question that I struggled with when these headlines earlier this year started coming out about the migrants in New York City. So these migrants are mostly asylum seekers who, like, just a clarification, they have entered legally as asylum seekers. So they get here, and they get to New York City. Sometimes they're shipped to New York City or other cities that are Democrat-run cities in a kind of like political game that it exceeds the topic of his podcast. But they're shipped there, and then they are not allowed to work. So they get here, they're not allowed to work, and I struggled a bit with how to judge this. So, but then I realized I was talking to a colleague, and I realized, okay, what is the alternative that they have? So they left a situation, a dire situation in Latin America, Central America, South America. They came here, and now they get to your city, and they're told, no, you cannot work. So your option is you literally die, starve, or freeze to death in the winter, or you take welfare. With those two choices, what are they supposed to do? So a lot of people just call them like moochers and parasites, and why do you even come here if you know that you won't be able to work? But that is, they are in a situation where they're escaping hell essentially. They get here, they can't work, and it's the alternative is die or take welfare. Can we blame them, Onkar, for taking welfare? Like, how do we judge this type of situation?
Yeah, I don't blame them. Indeed, I think they should. Like if you projected at an individual level, and if you were in that situation and you're trying to escape, and you think so asylum is often they think they're persecuted in their own country, they're at risk in their own country, that you leave, and if you do it on the premise, yeah, I'm going to America and I'm going to have a job and so on. If you get there and people say no, we're not going to allow you to work and so on, the idea that you're going to say, oh, but of course you can't take welfare either. That's crazy. And if you just projected yourself in that situation, you would take it. Now, to take it morally, it should be, look, I want to work. And if you would let me work, and I can find people who would want to hire me, so it's a voluntary win-win transaction, I'd stop taking welfare. If that really were their attitude, it's completely moral to take it in those circumstances. And there's that the idea that you would that so asylum is presented as these people are desperate, they're in need, and we're warm-hearted and we're going to receive them. If you don't allow them to work, you're not treating them as human beings. You're not actually respecting them. It's the first thing that I would want if I was an asylum seeker is I'm persecuted in my home country. I want to make something of my life in this country. If you would just leave me free, that's what I would do, and that's what they need. And the idea of what they need is extension of the welfare programs that go for more years and so on. No, what they need just is what every American needs, which is the freedom to live their life and the freedom to work. And that the whole orientation should be around that. And this is precisely because our immigration system is so anti-work. This is what legitimately gives rise to, I'm worried about a lot of immigrants coming here. Yeah, like if what's going to happen is a ton of people are going to come here and we're going to prevent all of them from working, that will be a disaster. And when you see things like New York City and they can't work, and that, as I said, politically there's some push to, well, maybe what we need to do is free up the system so that they can work. That, like, if you project that on a wider scale, that is a disaster. But the solution again is not, well, turn against immigration or immigrants. It's, we want the people who want to come and work, so why don't we allow them to work when they come?
Yes, this view of of immigrants as kind of like charity cases that need to be, that are so vulnerable, need to be protected. They need our help. You know, so many, like particularly the asylum seekers, they cross the desert, they got on top of a train to get here, like all sort of things. And this is where they need help. Like you just, I think I agree with, they just need to be left alone to build the life they want to be. And building a life means not being dependent on the government, on anyone, but on the government specifically. And like this is the view from the left, from a lot of people in the left. And I found, I think it's a prominent view, but I found this view as portrayed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And we have a little excerpt from an article. Ocasio-Cortez has also announced the Embrace Act, which would allow all immigrants, including those living in the country legally, to be provided with the same federal public benefits as U.S. citizens. And he quotes her as saying, "Our nation must recognize that our history, immigrants, enslaved peoples, and refugees built this country. We all do better when we create a just society that embraces our most vulnerable populations and paves a path to prosperity for all." And she continues, "This bill ensures that all persons in need are eligible for the largest programs of the social safety net, regardless of their immigration status." So I think this is pretty reflective of this view from the left that it's all about the need. It's all about, like, if someone has a need, then that is a claim on the wealth of others, on the products of the wealth of others. And I'm interested in particular in like this packaging that is going on with, like, packaging together asylum seekers with the rest of the immigrants. And there is a difference there between an immigrant that's coming, I guess it would be called an economic migrant that is coming here for better opportunities, versus someone who's escaping persecution either from the government or from gangs and things like that. Can you, Onkar, elaborate a little bit on this difference and why the left focuses so much on the asylum seekers more than the let's call it economic migrant?
Yeah, so you can think of it, one way to think of it is it's a push and a pull. So asylum seekers are more, they're being pushed out of their country, or even refugees if they're coming from war-torn areas, and so they're being pushed out, and it's so unbearable that they flee. They're not being pulled to America. It's not, they look at America and see, that's where I want to go, and I'm going to do everything I can to get there. That's the so-called economic immigrant, or just more broadly the immigrant who, I want a better life. I might be okay in Honduras or Guatemala. I'm not being persecuted and have to flee because I'm worried about I'm going to be killed in the next week. But it's like, I don't want to live like this. I want a better life. That's it. They're being pulled towards America. And when one thinks about immigration in American history, that's what it is. It's people being pulled towards America, that they see there's something good about America. There's something, my life will be way better there. I want to get there, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get there. Refugees and asylum seekers are more, they're being pushed out, and okay, I'll come here, it'll be better. Some then will learn that, oh, that America is way better. I should have tried to come here even before that I felt like I had to come here. And they'll learn and they'll adopt American values and so on. But the more dominant, when one thinks of immigration, is it's America's a pull. That's what the Statue of Liberty stands for, and why it stands as a symbol that everybody understands, as it's beckoning the people from around the world to come. Like, if you want something better, come here. And that's the issue, that it's a pull. And that's what AOC is unconcerned about. There's not, in what you quoted, there's not one word about people coming to work. It's about people, they're in need, they're desperate. We've got to have programs. They have to be eligible for these programs. They have to be wards of the state. And her view of it, and she puts it as, we have to create a just society. To her, a just society is to take from people who earn things and give it to people who didn't earn it. That's her view of justice, that's the essence of injustice. But when one thinks of immigrants being pulled to America, that's not what they want. What they want is not, oh yeah, I hope to come to America and earn a lot so that it will be taken from me and given to people who didn't earn it. That's not why they're coming. And so that, in terms of thinking about immigration, one should think about it as the people who are being pulled to America want to work, and it should be as easy as possible for them to work. And if you had that kind of system, there's no more reason to think. So, a welfare state, it's true, it incentivizes people to go on welfare, to seek the unearned. But just as we have a welfare state in America, it's not as though the majority of Americans decide then, yeah, I'm going to stop working and just try to live off the system and live off welfare. There's some who do that, but most understand no, but it's still, you have a way better life if you work and produce and so on, not go on welfare. And it would be the same for immigrants coming. There would be some who would come and who go on welfare, just as there are Americans who do that. And I can't be bothered to work and to earn my own way. But there's no reason to think the ratio would be any different for non-Americans than for Americans if it were easy to work when you come here. If anything, I would think the ratio would be, because it's hard to move, come to a new country, learn a new language, it will be, the ratio will be lower of the people coming to work versus, oh, what I want is welfare.
Yeah, and I think also the more if we imagine a country where we don't have this incentive of the welfare state, that you're going to attract, not saying this is the job of the government to attract a certain type or not a certain type, but the truth is people that will be attracted to America will be people that know that they have to work or they cannot be here. There is no other choice. And I think that sometimes is not the case in other countries where they receive immigration that of people that want to live off of welfare. This is not the case for the United States, because part of what the United States does is it's supposed to offer this freedom to work, to progress, to build a life from scratch, and to get all this opportunity if you work hard. The promise for the immigrants, I think, in the United States is as long as you work hard, you build the so-called American dream. You can progress. You can reach a level of wealth and safety and freedom that you cannot get in your home country as long as you work. And I think I agree, that is why immigrants come particularly to America and not go elsewhere when that's their intention.
Yeah, and part of what's distinctive about America, or it's actually true in Canada as well, and it might be true in a few other places like Australia, but it's unlike much of Europe. The American attitude is if you come and do that, you become an American. So the assimilation is part, it's not just the immigrant, well, do they assimilate, do they learn the language? It's from the perspective of Americans is, yeah, like we view you now as one of us. We don't care where you came from, what your skin color is. And that's true in Canada as well. Like they're not looked at as, yeah, but you're not really Canadian. There's much more of that in Europe, that it's, you might be working and so on, but you're not really French or you're not really German still. I know immigrants in Japan. Japan's like that. It's, you can be there 20 years, you can even learn the language and so, and it's still, yeah, but you're not really Japanese. And what's so different about America, as I said, and there's some other countries that are like this, is no, you really are an American if you do this. And so, and that conveys a welcoming attitude that is so positive, and it's positive for Americans here, and it's positive for the immigrants who are coming. And that's part of the why I resent so much the welfare state in regard to this, that it, to turn Americans into, no, now we fear immigrants and we're suspicious of them and we'll never really regard them as American and so on. That's against what the American ideals are. And part of what built the country, it's true that immigrants helped build the country, but part of what that meant is that Americans were welcoming of immigrants, and immigrants knew that. And it's very unusual in the history of the world.
I think I agree with that, and I think that's part of Ronald Reagan has a quote that I like. He says, I don't have it in front of me, but he says something like, "You can go to France and you will not you cannot become a Frenchman. You will go to Germany, you will not become a German. But you come to America and you can become an American." So yes, I agree with that, and that brings me to this kind of like objection that I hear quite often about, for like, this is broadly an objection to immigration, but it has a lot to do with the welfare state and our discussion that we're having right now, which is, well, immigrants really did contribute to America, in the 19th century. Like, yes, sure. However, immigrants today are not the same as immigrants now, and I think this connects to welfare, because I see a lot of people bringing up Milton Friedman in this context, and a quote of him that is taken out of context. So essentially, Friedman was in favor of immigration. He recognized the immense value that immigrants bring to America. And he actually was in favor of illegal immigration, because illegal immigrants cannot get welfare. But the way that the view is portrayed is that said that we cannot have immigration in a welfare state. And the quote is answering the question, why is immigration in the 19th century different from immigration now? The quote by Friedman is, because it is one thing to have free immigration to jobs. It is another thing to have free immigration to welfare. And you cannot have both. If you have a welfare state, if you have a state in which every resident is promised a certain minimal level of income or a minimum level of subsistence, regardless of whether he works or not, produces it or not, then it really is an impossible thing. So, because a lot of people try to hit some libertarians that are in favor of immigration, of free immigration, with this quote from these libertarian authorities saying, like, yeah, sure, immigration is good, but not in a welfare state. And, it was good before because the welfare state wasn't as massive as it is right now. What do you think about this quote, Onkar? And in the context of this welfare state that we have right now, how do we view immigration? And is the solution just to let people work? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, why don't we start? And I'm curious, like, you've read about this as well. What you think is so? If start with sort of the basic question of, is this even accurate as a representation of what Friedman's view is? And then I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. It's not even accurate representation. So then, after getting like what is his view, then to think, is there something right or something wrong, or maybe partly right, partly wrong in his view? But it's so the whole debate is, as we've been talking about, is so filled with straw men, exaggeration, and even just things made up, as you were saying with the Bobert quote that you put up earlier, that this is, unfortunately, I think, is another instance that they just want to, oh, look, like Milton Friedman says this is impossible, so what are you talking about? But they don't even go spend enough time of trying to figure out, well, what was Friedman's view? So how do you think about it? That what was his view?
Yes, so Friedman was, again, very much in favor of immigration. He recognized the contributions of like the immense contributions of immigrants in to America, but not just from a perspective of, oh, they contribute a lot. Like, he was, at least it seems, for in this part, like, for freedom and recognizing that there has to be a very compelling reason to stop a person from moving to one side to the other, to like that, to restrict the freedom of movement. And he in fact was like, we should not restrict the freedom of movement, in the sense that we should have illegal immigrants. I mean, let's get them here, but let's not make them legal so they cannot use a welfare state. I take that more or less to be his position. It's a position
Yeah,
in favor of immigration, but illegal immigration because there's a welfare state.
yeah, and if you think of, like, I've seen people, for instance, at Heritage use the Milton Friedman quote as, "Oh, look, you free market people, you don't even understand what one of your kind of leading intellectuals understood about immigration." And if they put it as what Friedman says is we should have a lot of illegal immigration, um, that, I mean, they would lose all their donors, and so they'll never dream of saying that, but they'll still use Freeman, and that's part of it. That so much of this debate is dishonest. It doesn't take much to get to, oh, okay, that's what Friedman was saying. It's illegal, it's fine, because then they can't qualify for all these welfare programs, and since immigration's good, and you don't have this negative of people going on welfare, yeah, illegal immigration is great. And I would like to see the Heritage people going around telling their donor, oh yeah, we think illegal immigration is great. So, but then if you ask even that in terms of, then, like, that's Friedman's view. Why couldn't you just make it that legal immigrants don't qualify for the program? Like, why do you have to make it keep them illegal and so? And there's not a good answer, I think, from Friedman on this point. He's just wrong. And I've looked at one, like, I think it was a 1999 interview where he sort of, yeah, I haven't really thought about that, and people are on the free market side are surprised that he hadn't thought about it, but and he's still suspicious of, well, it would be a problem to make them legal, and an element of why he's suspicious about it, I think, is right, that it's too much. They're second class citizens, like you're saying they're legal, but everybody else qualifies for these programs, and as you know, like, legal immigrants pay Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, and they won't qualify for the like, there's something wrong about that, and he's right about that. That there's something very politically very off about making, in effect, a second class citizen. It's a kind of separate. They're equal, but you're separate. Like, everybody pays taxes, but you can't get, like, there's something very problematic about that. But that, again, that's the problem with the welfare state. It's not a problem with immigration. And so the idea that you could use Friedman as, look, what he thinks is the problem's immigration, not the welfare state. I don't think that you're not kind of honestly grappling with his ideas if that's how you're trying to portray them.
So it seems like Friedman's solution to this problem was, well, let them come illegally, which is, like, it's problematic. But so in the system that we have right now, where we do have this welfare state, what do we do, and how do we do have the welfare state? This is what we have to deal with. It can't be that we have to curtail immigration because there's a welfare state. So what is in this context, the thing we should do?
Yeah, let's take one other element of Friedman's view that I think is wrong, and it's important here, and we've in effect talked about it, but let's put it in this context. Friedman views plausible if you don't allow immigrants to work, because then it's the people who want to come and work can't come, or at least can't work. The people who want to come and get welfare, they can come, and like AOC will embrace them with open arms. Oh yeah, we'd love to have you and subsidize you and have federal programs that you qualify for too. If that's the context, you can't have a lot of immigration. The more immigration you have, the more you're moving the whole welfare state towards bankruptcy. I mean, we're already moving there in terms of what the handouts from Social Security and Medicare are. And if you just brought more people getting handouts and not more people who can work, yeah, you're just moving faster towards a state of bankruptcy. But if you've got a mixed economy with a welfare state, but immigrants can work, as I said before, I don't see any reason to think you won't have the same mixture of, there'll be a lot of people, just like there's a lot of Americans who work and won't go on welfare, even though they qualify for it and so on. No, I'm going to build a much better life and a life that I can be proud of, a life that I've earned. I'm not getting handouts and going on the dole. And you'll have some immigrants who will, no, that's what I'm coming for. And yeah, I don't want to work. And so, but why to think like the majority of immigrants any more than the majority of Americans, like that once you have a welfare state, that's what Americans will do. Nobody will work and everyone will just say, I want to be on welfare. And that doesn't happen for Americans. Why would it happen for immigrants? And there's no answer to that in the end, other than an answer, yeah, but immigrants are bad people. So Americans are good. They wouldn't do this, but Mexicans or Guatemalans, yeah, of course they would do that. But that's just xenophobia and racism, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. This extremely collectivistic view of putting all immigrants in one bag, and that it, with all bad qualities, and like they are moochers that come here. But in fact, for many immigrants, they are leaving regimes where they could have been living off of welfare. The welfare state, for instance, in Argentina and in Colombia and other countries, is very big. And yet, there's not like a huge influx of Argentinians here for many reasons, except like me and a few others. But the welfare state is huge in many Latin American countries, and people could potentially stay there and just live off of welfare. But no, they don't want that. They want the freedom that is available here in America. They want to work and build a much better life here, not where they escape. But there's another solution that is very popular, and frankly, it does sound very plausible to me, which is this solution. Like, okay, if you don't want immigrants to go on welfare, the solution is to recognizing they already are limited in the welfare they can get, but let's build a wall around the welfare state, a higher wall around the welfare state, not around the country. Let's just cut them from all of welfare, and that is the solution. Now, what do you think of that solution for the system we have right now?
Yeah, I can understand the attractiveness of that in the context of people are pushing to restrict an already very restrictive immigration system even more. And if this was a way to stop it being further restricted, or even that it's a little bit easier for people who want to work, including like high skilled people from very Europe, Asia who want to come and can't. I mean, all the tech companies have problems that they can't get these employees. So it's not only we're talking about low skilled or Mexicans. It's people, and it's not as though every Mexican's low skill. It's like across the board, people wanting to work. I'm thinking, if this is what it takes to say like we're going to wall off the welfare state from them, I can see a plausibility of it. But one of the big problems with it is the whole way it's presented, and it disguises the injustice and evil of the welfare state, because part of the way it's put as it's, well, the immigrants haven't paid for the welfare state. They haven't paid for all these programs. So they can't send their kids to public school. They can't get Social Security. They haven't paid for it, which makes it sound like the welfare state is paid for. It's like we've earned this. And there are Americans who have this kind of view. And they have this, in part, this kind of view because this is how the whole system's disguised. If you remember in the Tea Party era, there were people, they're opposing Obamacare, but then there were some suggestions, well, are we going to cut Medicare as well? And they have signs like, hands off my Medicare. And part of what that means is, like, I've paid for Medicare, so it's mine. You can't now take it. And the fact is, you have not paid for it. It's not like a retirement plan where your money you were putting it away and it was being invested, and now when you need it in old age, you can draw on it. That's a private retirement plan. That's not what these plans are. The whole nature of the plan is to take from people who earn and give to people who didn't earn it. And why is that fine when we take from Americans and give to other Americans? But if we gave it to an immigrant, You take it from people who earned it and give it to someone who didn't earn it. But if they're an immigrant now, that's outrageous. And so presenting it as, oh, like, we're going to wall them off because they haven't paid for it. All the recipients haven't paid for it in the sense of what paid for means. They were hoping that, so when they were young, they were taxed. Some of them probably even voted for being voted for these programs on the hope that when I'm old, there's going to be other people who the government's going to go after and take their money to pay me. That's not, you didn't earn this. And so there's a way in which that whole proposal camouflages the evil of the welfare state. And I worry that that is a way of perpetuating it, because it makes it say, oh yeah, the people who didn't earn this, they won't get it, but the people who earned it, they get it, but nobody earned it.
Yes, that makes sense, Onkar. So in the system that we have right now, I think which is very complicated, including the issue of immigration itself and coming here legally and everything. It's very complicated, convoluted. But one step that can be taken, that when the things got really bad in New York City, that's when people started saying, okay, what if we let them work? I think that is something that would make a big difference in the system that we have right now. Ideally, we would have a system where anyone who's, I think, peaceful and wants to come to America to work and who's not a threat or a criminal, national security threat of any kind, can come here and work. And we wouldn't have to worry about the issue of welfare at all. Like, outside of immigration, the welfare state ideally would not exist. But even, like, again, in the system we have today, just having a pro-work immigration system, which needs for the system to be rethought in major ways, but we can, in the system we have, the immigration system we have, make some tweaks to let immigrants work and not have to be put in a position where it's like either die or take welfare.
Yeah, and anything that moves in that direction is good.
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that the situation that we saw this year will move people more, as I think it kind of has a little bit, towards, yeah, let's let them work, as opposed to let's not let them in at all. I mean, a lot of people used it, like I said, to be like, yeah, let's just not let anyone in because they live off of welfare. But there was some movement to, yeah, what if we let them work? So I hope it becomes more apparent that is an actual solution for what we have right now. Okay, so that is what we have for today. Thank you everyone for watching. I wanted to highlight that we are doing monthly Q&A episodes, and if you have any question about objectivist philosophy, you can send us your questions to expert@aynrand.org. And of course, as usual, if you enjoy the podcast, you can subscribe to our channel and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, including YouTube. And if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, you can email newideal@aynrand.org. We read all of the emails that we get and we respond to many of them. So thank you so much, Onkar. This was really helpful for me. I hope I'm sure it was for the audience as well, in thinking about this issue, which is complicated. And thank you to our audience for joining us, and we'll see you soon.